About a year ago, I was doing janitorial work for a contract cleaning company called Northline Facility Services. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid on Fridays, and most of the jobs were normal. Doctor's offices after closing. A dentist once. A county records building where everything smelled like dust and toner. They'd text me an address, tell me what needed scrubbing, and I'd show up in my navy polo with the company patch over the chest and a ring of supply closet keys clipped to my belt. The day this happened, Marla from dispatch called me around noon while I was eating gas station egg salad out of one of those triangle sandwich boxes in my Corolla. She said, "You want evening differential?" I asked where. She went quiet for half a second. Westridge Behavioral. I stopped chewing. Everybody in town called it the asylum, even though I'm pretty sure that wasn't the official name anymore. It sat outside city limits on an old piece of property where nothing else had ever been built, just that brick monster with the narrow windows and the chain-link service gate. People had stories about it. Every town has a place people used to scare each other, and Westridge was ours. I actually laughed and said, "You guys finally ran out of clinics?" Marla said, "It's just a floor contract. Halls, 1-day room, 1 locker room. Good rate." I looked at the sandwich, folded it back into the plastic, and asked how good. When she told me, I took the job. That part still bothers me a little. Not because I think I invited anything in. I'm not saying that. Just because I had a chance to say no, and I didn't. By the time I drove out there, the sky had that flat gray color it gets before dark in winter. Westridge looked even worse up close. 4 stories of old red brick, parts of it patched with a newer shade that never matched, and a central entrance with concrete steps worn down in the middle from years of foot traffic. The place had one of those institutional metal awnings bolted over the front doors, and the fluorescent tube under it buzzed so loud I could hear it before I shut off the engine. I sat in the car for a minute with the heater ticking and my work order open on my phone. Hall C, East Wing. Mop, sanitize, trash, spot clean walls. Simple. Inside, the lobby smelled like bleach, stale coffee, and that sweet plastic smell from vinyl chairs that had been wiped down too many times. There was a security window with thick, clear paneling and a woman in purple scrubs behind it, flipping through forms on a clipboard. She checked my ID, printed me a visitor badge, and pressed a button that unlocked the inner door with a hard electric clack. Nobody smiled. That sounds dramatic, but I mean it literally. The staff looked at me the way people look at a tow truck driver parked across the street, like I was necessary and annoying at the same time. The patients were worse. Some stared straight through the glass at the nurse's station. Some watched me walk by with their heads turned a little too far and held there. One older man in paper slippers kept rubbing the seam of his sleeve with 2 fingers and whispering into it over and over, like the fabric was whispering back. I told myself I was being stupid. It was a psych ward. People act strange in psych wards. That was the whole business model. A nurse named Tessa, according to her badge, showed me the cart closet and the mop sink. She was all business, hair tied back tight. White rubber clogs. One front pocket on her scrub top bulged with alcohol wipes and black pens. "Stay out of occupied rooms," she said. "If a door is closed, leave it closed. If anybody talks to you, keep moving." I said, "That happened a lot." She looked at me for maybe 1 second too long. "Keep moving." So I did. Hall C had cinder block walls painted a yellow that was probably supposed to look cheerful 20 years earlier. The floor was waxed, BCT tile, scuffed dull down the center where people walked. The ceiling lights hummed overhead. At every few yards, there was a smoke detector with a green LED blinking in a steady pattern. I remember that because once I noticed it, I kept checking for the next blink while I pushed the mop bucket along. The first hour wasn't bad. Trash bags. Wipe the handrails. Mop around the day room where a muted TV was playing some game show for a row of patients who didn't seem to be watching it. Mostly I was annoyed by how sticky the floor was near the vending machines. Somebody had spilled orange soda, and my right shoe kept making that tacky peel-off sound every time I pivoted. Then I started seeing the residents up close. I'm not trying to insult people who are sick. That's not what this is. But there were things about some of them that sat wrong in my head and never came loose. One woman stood with her face 3 inches from the window in a room door, breathing a cloudy patch into the glass, wiping it off with the side of her hand, then doing it again. A guy in a hospital gown had long scratches on both forearms, neat parallel lines, and he was smiling to himself while he counted ceiling tiles under his breath. Another patient shuffled past me with one sock on, one barefoot, dragging an IV pole with no bag hanging from it. And then there was a tall man. I first saw him at the far end of the corridor, near the medication cart. Even hunched a little, he stood over everybody, 6'10", 7 feet, somewhere in there. He wore white patient scrubs that stopped above his ankles, and the paper wristband looked too small against the bones in his arm. His hair had been clipped close to the scalp, but patches had grown back in uneven gray stubble. He turned when my bucket wheel squeaked, and he smiled at me. I wish I had a cleaner way to describe that smile. His lips pulled so far to one side I could see the back teeth on his left jaw, and his gums looked dry, almost chalky, like he'd been breathing through his mouth for days. It wasn't the kind of grin people give strangers. It looked practiced, like he was showing me a face he already knew people reacted to. I stopped walking. Just for a second, Tessa came up behind him and said, "Mr. Vale, bed, now." He didn't take his eyes off me right away. That was the part that stuck with me. He turned to do what she said, but the smile stayed there another beat, like it took effort to put it away. Then he ducked through his doorway and disappeared. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding and actually laughed at myself. Quiet, embarrassed, alone in the hall with a mop handle in my hand. A little later, Tessa told me to avoid the south side because they were doing rec therapy in the pool room. I had to go that way anyway to get fresh towels from a storage alcove, so I glanced in through the wired glass panel. It looked almost normal, which somehow made it worse. The pool was one of those old therapy pools, smaller than a public one, painted pale blue with a cracked black line down the center. A dehumidifier rattled in the corner. The room smelled sharply of chlorine and wet concrete. About 8 patients stood chest deep in the water holding bright red exercise balls against their stomachs while an instructor in a maroon polo demonstrated arm raises from the deck. Up, down, turn, up, down. The balls squeaked against their hospital gowns. Nobody spoke. Water sloshed softly against tile. One man kept moving half a second late, always correcting after everyone else had already finished. I stood there longer than I needed to, towels under my arm, watching that delayed movement. It got under my skin in a way that's hard to explain without sounding ridiculous, so I'll just say this. It looked less like exercise and more like people remembering how to be people a moment after they were supposed to. Then the instructor noticed me in the door and snapped, "Can I help you?" I held up the towels and said, "Nope, just lost." He didn't laugh. I kept walking. For a while after that, nothing happened. That matters. I want that on record because the dead stretch in the middle is what kept me there. I emptied a linen hamper. I found a stale pack of peanut butter crackers in my cart and ate them standing beside the mop sink. I texted Marla that they owed me double for the haunted YMCA wing, and she replied with a laughing emoji and a thumbs up. I even started feeling stupid for how I'd reacted to the tall guy. He was a patient. Sick, maybe medicated, probably miserable. I was the one turning him into a campfire story in my own head. My shift was almost over when it happened. Hall C had gone quieter. The TV in the day room was off. Most of the patient room doors were shut for the night, each with a little observation window dark or half blocked by the angle of a bed. I had my cart pointed toward the service elevator and was already thinking about drive-through coffee on the way home. Then I saw the open room. Just one, near the bend in the hall. At first I thought somebody had fallen. A pair of legs lay across the doorway, heels on the tile, knees slightly bent. Bare feet, pale shins under the hem of scrub pants. The upper body was inside the room where I couldn't see it. I stopped with both hands on the mop handle. I remember hearing a distant ice machine dump cubes somewhere down the corridor. I remember the little squeak one caster on my cart made when it rotated. Small things, clear as anything. I took one step toward the room. Before I could say hello, those legs jerked hard and vanished inside. Not a scramble, not somebody getting up. It was one sudden pull, fast enough that the heels left a streak on the tile. My mouth went dry. I should have backed away right then, I know that. But for a split second, my brain lined up other explanations. A patient helping a nurse, somebody having a seizure, orderlies restraining someone. If I walked off and somebody died because I didn't bother to look, that would stay with me too. Then the blood came out. It slid under the threshold in a glossy red sheet, thin at first, then thicker, branching into the grout lines between the tiles and pushing out into the hall under the fluorescent lights. I set the mop down without meaning to. It clattered. I flinched at the sound and stood there listening. No shout, no call for help, just a wet, tearing sound from inside the room and a heavy swallow over and over. I moved closer on the balls of my feet. By then I had my keys in one hand, the ring threaded through my fingers for no reason that would have helped. My visitor badge tapped softly against my chest with each step. When I reached the door, I leaned in just enough to see past the frame. It was Mr. Vale. He was crouched over Tessa on the floor between the bed and the wall. One of her white clogs had come off and was lying near the radiator. Her head was turned at an angle that made no sense, and he had both hands braced on her shoulders while he bit into the side of her neck. Not nipping, not shaking. He was chewing. That's the word. Chewing, with these small, patient little motions of the jaw, and every time he pulled back, a string of red stretched from his mouth to her throat. Her eyes were gone. I don't know if he did that first or if it happened in the struggle, but the sockets looked packed dark and wet, and blood had soaked into the collar of her scrub top so completely the fabric had turned almost black. He lifted his head. One of her eyelashes was stuck to his cheek. He looked right at me. His mouth was open just enough for me to hear his teeth click together once. I backed up, slow, careful, and my legs felt thin and unreliable, but I made them work. He started to stand, and I saw how his head nearly reached the top of the doorframe. I didn't wait to see anything else. I left the cart, left the mop, left my jacket hanging in the supply closet. I walked fast until the corridor bent, then I ran. My shoes slapped the waxed floor. Somewhere behind me, a metal bed frame screeched against the wall. I hit the security door with my palm and shouted before I even had words, just noise, and the clerk behind the window stood up so fast her chair rolled backward into a filing cabinet. She buzzed me through. I kept going. The cold air outside hit my face so hard it felt sharp, almost clean enough to cut with. I yanked my Corolla door open, got inside, locked it, unlocked it by accident when my hand slipped, locked it again, then backed out so fast the tires kicked gravel off the edge of the lot. I didn't call until I was halfway down the county road because my hands would not stay steady on the wheel. When I finally hit the emergency line, I had to pull over by a drainage ditch and put the car in park just to get the address out clearly. I told them there was a man in Hall C, East Wing, and a nurse was down. and there was so much blood I could smell the iron of it even with my windows up. The dispatcher kept asking me to repeat myself. I did, 3 times. I never went back to Westridge. Northline mailed my last check. Marla left 2 voicemails. I never answered. I found another job in a warehouse where the worst thing I had to scrub off the floor was hydraulic fluid. And still, that room stayed with me. Not the blood exactly, not even Tessa. It's the moment before I ran. The second when he raised his face and looked at me with that patient wristband cutting into his skin and that eyelash stuck to his cheek, and there was no surprise in him at all. No confusion, no frenzy. He looked calm, busy, interrupted. Sometimes I'm driving at night and a tall shape moves past a fluorescent storefront, and my hands lock on the steering wheel until the light changes. Sometimes I hear rubber soles squeak on tile in some totally normal place, a pharmacy or a school hallway, and the back of my tongue fills with that copper taste from the room. I still check the rear view at red lights. I tell myself I'm looking for headlights, for cops, for some idiot coming up too fast behind me. But that isn't what I'm checking. I'm checking the narrow strip of darkness between my front seats because part of me is still waiting to see a long face rise there from the back seat, smiling before it reaches my shoulder.